The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow across the sterile office. My heart pounded as I stood in front of everyone, my colleagues, my so-called friends, and most painfully, my cruel boss, Victoria. She loomed over me with an air of superiority that made my skin crawl. Her sharp features were accentuated by the cold light, her eyes gleaming with a mix of disdain and triumph. "You're done here," she sneered, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade. "And let's be clear, you'll never work in this industry again." Gasps rippled through the room, but no one dared to speak up. I felt the weight of their stares pressing down on me, some filled with pity, others with relief that it wasn't them. My hands trembled as I clutched the box of my belongings, each item a reminder of the years I had poured into this place. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of her. Victoria's smirk widened, her lips curling into a cruel smile that seemed to mock my very existence. "Take your things and go," she added, her tone dripping with finality. Every word was a dagger, slicing deeper into my already fragile confidence. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as if conspiring with her to crush me entirely. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the humiliation rooted me to the spot. All I could do was nod stiffly, my pride shattered, and walk out with what little dignity I had left. As I stepped into the elevator, the door slid shut with a metallic clang that echoed the finality of everything I had just lost. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel surface, pale, hollow-eyed, defeated. Each floor ticked by with agonizing slowness, and with every passing second, the weight of Victoria's words sank deeper into my chest. Asterisk, you'll never work in this industry again. Asterisk, it wasn't just a dismissal. It was a sentence, a verdict delivered with such calculated cruelty that it left me reeling. I replayed the scene in my mind, dissecting every detail, the way Victoria's voice had carried across the room, ensuring everyone heard her pronouncement loud and clear. Her sneer wasn't just for me. It was a performance, a spectacle meant to assert dominance over the entire team. And they had watched, silent witnesses to my public execution. Some faces blurred together now, but others lingered vividly in my memory. The co-worker who avoided my gaze, the intern whose wide eyes betrayed shock mixed with fear, and worst of all, Sarah, my supposed best friend, who had turned away as though looking at me might stain her somehow. Their silence spoke volumes, louder than any words ever could. They didn't stand up for me, because standing against Victoria came with consequences none of them were willing to face. But it wasn't just about today, it was about everything leading up to this moment. The late nights spent perfecting presentations only for Victoria to take credit. The endless stream of impossible deadlines designed to break me. The subtle jabs disguised as feedback during meetings, always delivered with a saccharine smile that masked her venomous intent. She hadn't fired me because I failed. She fired me because I succeeded too well. My ideas brought results. My work ethic inspired others, and my resilience threatened her fragile hold on power. To her, I wasn't just an employee. I was a rival, someone who needed to be crushed before I overshadowed her completely. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, anger began to simmer beneath the surface of my despair. This wasn't fair. None of it was fair. But fairness wasn't something Victoria cared about. She thrived on control, manipulation, and fear, and I had become collateral damage in her quest to maintain it. As I walked out of the building, clutching the box of my belongings like a shield, I realized something else. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about losing trust in myself, in others, in the belief that hard work would be rewarded. And yet, amidst the pain, a spark ignited within me. If Victoria thought she could destroy me, she was wrong. Dead wrong. The next morning, the office buzzed with whispers long before anyone arrived. News traveled fast in our tight-knit industry, and by 9 a.m., speculation about Victoria's latest power move had reached fever pitch. People huddled around coffee machines and water coolers, dissecting every detail of my firing with morbid fascination. "Did you hear what she said?" one voice hissed. "She practically banished her," another chimed in, shaking their head. For once, Victoria wasn't orchestrating the narrative. She was the topic of it. But even as rumors swirled, there was an undercurrent of unease. No one dared say it aloud, but we all knew. Firing me had been unusually brutal, even for her. Something felt off. Then, at precisely 10:15 a.m., the energy in the office shifted. A sleek black car pulled up outside the building, its tinted windows reflecting the crisp autumn sunlight. Heads turned as a man emerged, tall and commanding, his tailored suit exuding authority without trying. He moved with purpose, his polished leather shoes clicking against the pavement as he strode toward the entrance. There was no mistaking the aura of someone accustomed to being in charge. Employees froze mid-conversation. Their curiosity piqued. Who was this stranger? Victoria appeared moments later, her usual poise faltering slightly as she approached him. From my vantage point, sitting alone at a cafe across the street, I could see her plaster on her trademark smile, though it wavered ever so slightly. The man barely acknowledged her greeting, brushing past her with an air of indifference that sent ripples of tension through the glass doors. His presence demanded attention, and the entire office seemed to hold its collective breath as he disappeared inside. Minutes passed, and then chaos erupted. Phones buzzed incessantly as frantic texts flew between former coworkers. Someone had overheard snippets of conversation. Acquisition, merger, new ownership. Panic spread like wildfire. Victoria, who had always ruled with an iron fist, suddenly looked small, her confident facade crumbling under the weight of uncertainty. By noon, the truth became undeniable. The company had been sold overnight, and this enigmatic figure was now the owner. For the first time in years, Victoria wasn't the one calling the shots. The boardroom door swung open with a force that made the glass panels shudder. Every head snapped up as the new owner entered, his imposing figure silhouetted against the bright hallway light. His piercing gaze swept across the room, lingering briefly on Victoria before settling on the rest of us. The atmosphere crackled with tension, a palpable mix of fear and anticipation. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between him and Victoria, unsure of what was about to unfold. "Good afternoon," he began, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I'm Alexander Kane, and as of this morning, I own this company." His words hung heavy in the air, each syllable deliberate and measured. He didn't raise his voice, but there was an undeniable authority in his tone that commanded respect, or perhaps obedience. Victoria's jaw tightened visibly, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the conference table. Alexander's gaze finally locked onto hers, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear cross her face. "Miss Hart," he said, his tone icy but controlled, "I've reviewed your leadership record, your decision-making patterns, and your treatment of employees. Let's just say," he paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm, "your methods leave much to be desired." Victoria's composure cracked further, her lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came out. Instead, Alexander continued, his voice rising slightly, laced with barely contained contempt. "You've built a culture of fear and favoritism. You've alienated talent, stifled innovation, and driven away some of the brightest minds this company has ever seen, all while lining your own pockets and polishing your reputation." The room was deathly quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Even those who had once feared Victoria now sat frozen, watching her unravel before their eyes. Alexander leaned forward, resting both palms on the table as he addressed her directly. "Do you know why I bought this company?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. When she didn't answer, he straightened and took a step closer to her. "Because I saw potential buried beneath your toxic leadership. Potential you systematically destroyed." His next words hit like a thunderclap. "Starting today, you are relieved of your duties. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room, followed by stunned silence. Victoria's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she struggled to process what was happening. "You can't," she stammered, but Alexander cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "I can, and I have," he replied, his voice cold and final. Security will escort you out. Your severance package is waiting in HR. Without waiting for a response, he turned his back on her, dismissing her as easily as one might swat away an insect. Two burly security guards appeared in the doorway, their expressions unreadable as they flanked her chair. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. For a fleeting moment, she looked like she might fight back, her eyes blazing with fury. But then something shifted, her shoulders sagged, and the fire dimmed, replaced by sheer desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Give me another chance." Alexander didn't even glance at her. "You had countless chances," he said evenly. "You wasted them all." With that, the guards led her out, her protests fading into the distance as the door clicked shut behind them. The room remained eerily silent for several seconds, the weight of what had just transpired sinking in. Then, slowly, heads began to turn toward me. Whispers broke out, growing louder as realization dawned. "Wasn't she the one who got fired yesterday?" someone murmured. Another voice chimed in. "He must have known about her." Alexander turned to face the group, his expression softening slightly. "Let me be clear," he said, addressing everyone now. "This company is starting fresh. Toxicity has no place here. Those who value integrity, collaboration, and growth will thrive under my leadership. Those who don't," he let the sentence trail off, leaving no room for ambiguity. As he concluded the meeting, his eyes met mine through the glass wall. There was something in his gaze, recognition, maybe even gratitude, that sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever it was, one thing was certain. The tables had turned, and justice had arrived in the most unexpected form. As I sat in the quiet solitude of my apartment that evening, the events of the day replayed in my mind like a relentless loop. Victoria's downfall had been swift and merciless, a reckoning that left me both vindicated and unsettled. Yet, it wasn't just her dismissal that lingered in my thoughts. It was the way Alexander Kane had looked at me before leaving the boardroom. That brief moment of connection, however fleeting, sparked something deep within me. It wasn't anger or bitterness anymore. It was resolve. Resolve to reclaim not just my career, but my sense of self-worth. The next morning, I dressed with purpose, choosing an outfit that exuded confidence rather than conformity. The familiar streets leading to the office felt different underfoot, as though the city itself had shifted alongside my perspective. When I arrived, the receptionist greeted me with a tentative smile. "Mr. Kane is expecting you," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. My stomach churned with a mix of excitement and apprehension, but I nodded and followed her directions to his office. Alexander rose from behind his desk as I entered, his towering frame radiating authority yet tempered by an unexpected warmth. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for me to sit. His tone was polite but direct, skipping pleasantries altogether. "I've reviewed your file, and I want to offer you a position, Director of Operations." Shock coursed through me, but I managed to keep my composure. "Why me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Because you're exactly the kind of leader this company needs," he replied without hesitation. "Your track record speaks for itself, and frankly, I admire your resilience. Not many people could endure what you did and still walk back into this building." His words struck a chord, igniting a spark of determination within me. "I accept," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding the company's culture. Gone were the days of fear-based management. Instead, I fostered collaboration, encouraged innovation, and prioritized transparency. Teams flourished under my leadership, their creativity unleashed by newfound freedom. Colleagues who had once avoided eye contact now sought me out for guidance, their trust slowly returning. But the journey wasn't without challenges. Old habits die hard, and resistance bubbled up from unexpected corners. Former allies of Victoria whispered doubts, questioning whether I was truly capable of filling such a pivotal role. Doubts crept into my mind too, late at night when exhaustion set in. Was I good enough? Could I live up to Alexander's faith in me? One particularly grueling day, after hours spent mediating conflicts and strategizing solutions, I found myself in Alexander's office. "You're doing remarkable work," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But you look like you're carrying the weight of the world." "It's not easy," I admitted, my voice tinged with frustration. "Some days, it feels like I'm fighting ghosts, hers, mine, everyone's." He nodded thoughtfully. "Change is never easy, especially when it challenges deeply ingrained systems. But remember this, progress isn't linear. What matters is that you're moving forward." His words resonated deeply, anchoring me during moments of doubt. Slowly but surely, the company transformed, not because of me alone, but because I empowered others to believe in themselves and in the possibility of something better. And as I stood in the newly renovated workspace months later, surrounded by smiling faces and buzzing energy, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding myself. Months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the company headquarters, the city skyline stretching endlessly before me. The wind tugged gently at my hair as I gazed out over the bustling streets below, a sense of fulfillment washing over me. The transformation of the company was complete, not just in structure, but in spirit. Where once fear and resentment had festered, collaboration and innovation now thrived. Teams worked seamlessly together, fueled by mutual respect and shared goals. Employees no longer tiptoed around authority. They embraced it, knowing their voices mattered. It wasn't perfect, no workplace ever is, but it was alive in a way it had never been before. And so was I. Gone was the woman who had walked out of that elevator with her head bowed, clutching a cardboard box like a lifeline. In her place stood someone stronger, surer, and unafraid to take risks. Leading the company's revival had taught me more than just how to manage teams or navigate corporate politics. It had shown me the power of resilience. Every challenge I faced, every obstacle I overcame, had chipped away at the lingering doubts Victoria had planted in my mind. Now, I saw them for what they were. Lies meant to keep me small. Alexander joined me on the terrace, his presence grounding yet unobtrusive. "You've done incredible work," he said, his voice warm with sincerity. "Not just for the company, but for yourself." I smiled, feeling a rare moment of peace settle over me. "It wasn't just me," I replied. "You gave me the opportunity when no one else would. That meant everything." He shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "Opportunities are meaningless unless you seize them. You seized yours, and then some." We stood in companionable silence for a while, the city's hum providing a steady backdrop to our reflections. Finally, I turned to him, my voice steady. "What's next for you? Are you planning to stay involved?" Alexander chuckled softly, his gaze distant. "I think my work here is done. This company doesn't need me anymore, it has you. Besides, there are other battles to fight, other broken systems to fix." His words stirred something within me, a quiet admiration for his relentless pursuit of change. "Well, wherever you go, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He nodded, his smile faint but genuine. "Remember this, true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do. You've proven that more times than you realize." As he walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts, I felt a profound sense of closure. Victoria's shadow no longer loomed over me. It had dissipated, replaced by the light of my own achievements. Revenge hadn't been my driving force, it had been redemption. And in finding it, I discovered something far greater: the courage to rewrite my story on my own terms.